We're going to move to our submission from the facts, and we've got Geoff Neal joining us online. Geoff will have some PowerPoint presentations as well, so we'll just get those fired.
Thank you, James, members, and everyone else that's tuning in today. We did 8 written submissions, and we're going to do a visual submission today rather than oral submission. So I'm going to go over the key insights and recommendations from the 8 submissions that we've done, and welcome questions at any time after this submission. I know we've only got 10 minutes. Can you see the screen okay?
We can, and we can see you as well, Geoff.
Fantastic. So let's start with what we agree with, and that is that we all want unity and prosperity for the whole country, but we also know that there's huge division right now. This isn't something new, and it's not something caused by this bill. The best polling we have on this, if we look back, is the Essential Guardian polling from just before the election, and it showed that 77% of Kiwis felt we'd become more divided, and only 3% said we'd been less divided. So this was our first submission. And before anyone says, what about the TVNZ racial tensions poll? That was very misleading for dozens of reasons that we've put into that submission, if anyone's interested. This social division that we have, it's backed up by this Herald Donata poll done a year earlier. So this covers 2020 to 2022, and 2/3 of Kiwis felt would become more divided. Some political commentators will suggest that this isn't a big issue. Only 8% care about this, but this is simply not true. Māori/treaty issues are now the number 4 most important issue for Kiwi voters. This is just behind health, and it's now ahead of crime, environment, education, and other issues. And of course, we've had more than 300,000 submissions. So I'll start with an early recommendation here. Given the importance of social cohesion for our country, we need Stats NZ to run some monthly measures on how is it going. Is it getting better or worse? We've got some other challenges. Our MMP and media systems reward factions for creating that kind of division, so we need some solutions for that. A great starting point would be the new Human Rights Commissioners and Race Relations Commissioner calling out all uses of racism, but we also need politicians, media, academia to lead by example on terms like racism as well. And whilst we're a numbers-based organisation, we've done a lot of word analysis here. I'm not going to go through it, but it's here as a reference. These are the leading resources in the world for what is racism, and there's 4 key aspects. You might be particularly interested in the UN's. So if we have this social division, who do we turn to? And it's caused by, a lot of it's caused by the treaty. Who do we turn to? And Horizon and the Human Rights Commission have done some research, and sadly, barely 1/3 of us trust the Waitangi Tribunal, and it gets worse. We get most of our information from politicians and the media, but only 7% of Kiwis, way down here, trust MPs, and only 6% trust the news media to provide accurate treaty information. That's below friends and family, below advocacy groups like many of those giving submissions, and it's just right there amongst social media too. So this is not a great situation. So if we've got this division and we can't trust organisations, we have to go to polling. And let's start with the polling that we can't look at, because there's been a lot of politically biased polling. And I know a lot of media are tuning in, but we can't use the Stuff or the TVNZ polling. Neither of them, this is all about the treaty principles. It's about the words of those principles. And neither Stuff nor TVNZ actually even tested the words, which is crazy. Stuff, I know you're listening, you had an incredibly biased question. You can't lead with a political leader in a party for a fair question and research. And TVNZ didn't even include the question or the preamble in their broadcast. So that leaves us with Curia. And I know some of you will think that they're right-leaning, but they have provided really accurate and fair polling so far. I've looked at all of their research design. And back around the election, there was very strong support, 3-1 overall, and strong support across all parties. Green voters were split. New Zealand First and Party Māori samples were too small at that time. Fast forward a year, and we have a lot of political parties being very active in their opposition to this bill. We have the media as well with all of their coverage. And we have some slightly reworded principles. Now, ACT support really dropped. Nationals remained 4-1, voters in favour versus oppose. New Zealand First is even higher at 5-1. ACT's support dropped. Labour's tanked from 6-1 to 1-1. And one can only presume that's probably because of the stance taken by the party. Greens remained 1-1. And even Te Party Māori at the time had 15% supporting the bill and 44% unsure. 2 months ahead, back to December, and the third and final publicly available poll shows that consistent 2-1 support carrying on. So this is also Curia, ACT paid for it, but we've got 2-1 support versus opposed, and 4-1 for the final principle. again, a lot of the results remain the same. With the reworded principles, ACT support went up and Te Pāti Māori's support went down, especially after the Hikoi protest. Labour and Greens remain 1-1. What's fascinating is this poll also asked for do you support the bill without showing the wording, and the support dropped from 2-1 to 1-1. So this shows just how emotionally, I guess, and politically charged this debate has been. A lot of people who don't support the bill, it's got nothing to do with the wording. It's got to do with what they've been led to believe or how they feel about it. Stuff and Curia, they've also asked about referendum. It's easily the most preferred method to, and I know a lot of people are going to be talking about the judiciary and they've worked on this for 50 years, but the judiciary is the least preferred method by voters to define the treaty principles. And on that, I've got a full breakdown by party in the submission 3. And even probably more important statistic is that 38% of us would rather avoid the debate so as to not upset others. We've really failed as a nation to foster healthy democratic discourse when we've got 1/3 of us sort of too scared to talk about it. Some other related polling that is helpful for the debate. Kiwis want less co-governance. We want a referendum on co-governance, and we want English first communications from the government. Co-governance was never explained well by the government, by the Labour 2020 to 23 government, despite the promises from Chris Hipkins at the time. A huge percent don't understand it, and many more only have a basic understanding. The majority of New Zealanders would like New Zealand to be called New Zealand, and only 10% Aotearoa. This is just one of those other wedges that I guess is dividing us a little. Our 5th submission was very short. There was a lot made of the KC letter, that 38, actually 42 KC signed in total, but there was no coverage that 103 KCs didn't sign it. So 3/4 of KCs didn't sign that letter at all. And if you think about the retired KCs, only 4 signed it and about 60 to 70 more did not sign it. And later today, you're going to hear from Common Grace Aotearoa. They're going to tell you 440 Christian leaders signed a similar letter, but they're not going to tell you about the many more thousands of Christian leaders who did not sign it. So we have to take these letters with a grain of salt. On to media bias, because we just sort of talked about that then. 2/3 of journalists self-identify as left-wing. Only 1/3 of Kiwis trust the media. We are in the bottom 3 in the Western world for media trust, with the US and UK. The number 1 cause is political bias and a lack of facts. And we saw that come through this whole debate, whether it's the Hikoi promotion, bad polls being promoted, good polls being hidden, the coverage of that KC letter. And Harold, I know you're tuning in too, but you deleted comments on 5 different treaty stories. No other stories, only treaty stories, and you deleted all of our comments. It gets worse. Only 6% of us out here, our citizens, trust the news media to provide us with accurate information about the treaty, Te Tiriti. And perhaps this is because 77% of journalists think that the treaty applies to all or most stories. Private media can do what they wish, of course, within the laws of our nation. But state media has an obligation to the taxpayer. And we have One News as the most biased state media outlet. They're rated 15% left-wing by voters. Their complaints have doubled from 1,000 to 2,000 per year, and they now only uphold 1%. The real problem here is the Broadcasting Act, or Code of Broadcasting Standards. And a lot of people who are watching this will be shocked to know that it is specifically written into the code that media, state-owned media, is allowed to be politically biased with their taxpayer funds. And there is the exact wording there. So the solution is we have to remove that. We have to fix that code up. We also need state-owned media to reflect the views of citizens, and we need to legislate against social media suppression of political opinions. Onto ethnicity race data. We've seen away dozens of OIAs. We actually have no race data at all in New Zealand, and we have very flawed ethnicity data. So rather than go through all of this in detail, I encourage anyone to look into the submission number 7 to see what all those flaws are. But
Jeff, just letting you know, Jeff, there's just under a minute left.
Yeah. We have all of this data. We have placed all this importance on ethnicity, but we don't place the same importance on how we measure that or gather it or verify it. We've done some work that estimates that 9% of the country is made up of Māori ancestry. Would love Parliament to review this important piece of work. Finally, we have elected representatives who aren't even representing us, whether it's a treaty, and not even their own voters on the treaty bill, Three Waters, Māori Awards, citizens-initiated referendums, haven't had one for a decade. We had 5, but national ones ignored the results. And a final summary slide here. For the treaty principles, the status quo, it's not working, it's not defined, judiciary is not preferred. We either define these treaty principles in legislation, we remove the treaty principles from legislation, which is National New Zealand First policy, or we elevate the Bill of Rights Act. Thank you very much. I know there's a lot here, and I'm willing to share a lot more and answer any other questions with politicians or media after this.
Thanks, Geoff. That's the time for this section today, but we appreciate your submission and your detailed information as usual.
Great. Thank you, guys.